I'm Christy King, your host of the FanReach podcast. Each episode features conversations with former NFL players and current sports business experts, Kenyon Rashid and Brian Jones, as we explore the present and future of technology in the sports business. On this episode, we are joined by streaming technology expert Eric Bolten of Zixi. We take a deep dive into how 5G can help sports venues and teams blow open innovative and lucrative new fan experiences, including betting, gaming, and so much more. It's a really interesting conversation. So let's get started. What is it that technology on the streaming side and literally the data that's going back and forth has to do with the future of the sports business? Mm-hmm. That's really the crux of what we're talking about. So I don't know which of you if one of you has a question that you wanted to kind of throw at Eric, because where we left off was talking about specifically latency and how that would affect how betting would work, in-game betting would work.
The crux is you look at the broadcast entities and they're out there doing or compiling their own data and querying their viewers. And as we've discussed previously, it's about 1 of 3, 1 in 4 would love to see gaming overlay during the live broadcast. But of course, that's not going to move the needle currently. And the other challenge that the broadcasters see is the latency issue. Depending on your broadband, the streaming service you're utilizing, what have you, the delay could be up to a minute. And so incorporating gaming, it's better in stadium than it would be on television currently, according to different broadcasters. So that's the main challenge right now, is how do you pair those two and get them in sync, where you could have a second screen for those who would like to partake of in-game betting and not disrupt those fans who are not so inclined. So how do we get married where everything's in sync and in flow and there are no latency issues?
I think that's a key question, because at the end of the day, are we talking play-by-play in-game betting? Are we talking quarterly? Are we talking at the half? BJ, as you know, we've been around the play-by-play betting thing since 2001 with a company called Sports Action that we introduced to Kirch Media in Germany. They launched it through Sky Bet on interactive TV over there, which was basically a play-by-play. You could bet through your TV remote. And this was in 2001 and 2002. Sports Action was actually in the Vegas sports book, acting as a play-by-play betting system just within the sports book. And one of the key aspects that we encountered that we found was, well, what is an in-game betting experience that doesn't ruin the viewing experience, right? So the big question that we have is, how many questions and how much do you want to answer? How much do you want to bet while you're still enjoying the game? Do you want fans with their heads down in the phone, or do you want them watching the game? Because if their heads are down in the phone, you're taking away advertising dollars. And so I think what we're trying to figure out, along with the latency and so forth, is what's acceptable in terms of interactivity during the game. And I don't think we really, and maybe Eric can speak to this a little bit, but I don't think we know if that's, one series of betting on the NFL side. Is that something that's continuous? I mean, that's the biggest question, I guess, that I have is how much is too much and how much is not enough, I guess, is the question I got for Eric.
No, that's a good set of questions and a great set of context. So as Christy alluded, we little Zixi started out just bringing broadcast on the internet, and that has now blossomed into multiple networks. And by that, I mean fiber and in the cloud. And the big animal that's going to come into the room and allow this change is going to be 5G. And that's where you're going to get to huge amounts of data moving at extremely low latency. So we are actually in, and as Christy alluded about what we can say, we are about to go into production with our good friends at Verizon and Amazon, with one of the larger global broadcasters on the planet, for a distribution deal. And we're definitely going to see how things change in production, and you're going to see how things change in distribution of traditional television. And then, as you just referenced, what does this in-venue idea mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I've got, and I know they're publicly announced, the NFL has said it's going to be doing gambling, and the NHL has stated the same. So there's no secrets there, and we will assume every sports does. England has been doing this forever, and see the red light, and you know that. Yeah. So yeah, and at some point, we'll see when our sports players start to look like NASCARs, but they're different branding.
Yep.
That's going to come. That's on its way. But I still remember when they put Spider-Man logos on the baseball bases, and they didn't like that very much.
Right.
But what's interesting about what you're saying, Kenyon, is that I think it's going to be a progressive part. So, it's going to be run, and again, I understand that we do software, but from a viewer point, you have this pandemic. So first thing you had to do is bring people back into the stadiums, and even that's at a different level. You've always had in certain other sports, how do I get people to go to the venues? I mean, certain franchises have higher attendance than others, but that said, getting the modern generation that is cord cutting to be willing to go in and participate with the sport is critical to all those revenue streams that come with the merch and the gate and the other parts on that. Mm-hmm. The experiences of what you're going to get, though, and what we're seeing in 5G, we're able to get, we're doing 4K, but we did doing some tests on 8K 100 megabit 50 frame, which is the equivalent of like having a window in the air and seeing the person on the other side.
Wow.
So while I think it's very true that watching the game is one thing, you will see the Vegas sports books and the betting areas light up. And 5G plays really well to that because they don't care what you're looking at. They want you. And I think they will set that infrastructure so that from stadium and synchronized to these betting parlors, you will have a bet per play. I mean, you'll be able to go third and long. Are they going to run or pass? You're going to be able to pick the player. You're going to be able to hit your tab and run across that. On the in-stadium level, you will have that available. And it's not clear as to how much they're going to really add. I mean, I've watched the Mets and MLB were doing some AR, VR type things a couple of years ago. And I could see that coming out, like the fact that you'll be able to get different perspectives. And it won't just be that you're at a stadium missing the game because of the infrastructure the stadium allows you, which again, 5G needs to roll out. It's not in every country, city. It's going to be working its way on the national fabric level, but you'll be able to provide immersive experiences that are simply not available outside that stadium, which is a reason to go into it. Here's your Oculus Rift, so I can watch it live, or I put this on and I can turn my head or swipe and see what things I want to watch. And I'd seen some sizzle wheel and some other parts on a different panel that I was on with BT Sport showing holographic projection and the ways that could play, and people could have, so you're in watching the game live and your family and friends are seeing the same thing you're seeing. And I mean, again, a little fanciful, but not that far out. And all of that is going to provide a ton of betting. I mean, the initial numbers I saw in the NFL were about $2 billion in expected revenue increase from the gambling revenue. I think baseball was like 1.5 and hockey and NBA like $1 billion around a piece. But it's almost a $5 billion bump to the sports industry at the time when rights are hitting their peak. So real revenue. And, you watch the recent effect of Tom Brady, and as a Boston person and fan, a now Tampa Bay fan, in addition, watching the merch numbers and what he sold and what people will bet. And so I think that if you win this, you could almost make the correlation to the stock market. I mean, the fact you had Robinhood and the fact that the masses can buy fractional shares and participate with the click of an application, you expand that to sports betting, and the fact that I don't have to fly to Vegas and I don't have to do this, and I can control game it, and all of the local states are going to get their tax revenue off this. It's going to be big business everywhere. And the players proved in the stadiums that they had partial, but look at the ratings that the NFL held with empty stadiums. And I have to give them credit for holding the whole
league
together.
People love the NFL. Right. That is no doubt. And really, if you look at the growth around daily fantasy, which started in early 2000 to where the revenues are today, and as former players, where we see forecasting is and always in the CBA. It's how the league looks at revenue 10 years moving forward. BJ, can you recall when they have done a 10-year collective bargaining agreement?
No.
10 years.
No, cannot.
First of all, I want to thank them for the 10 years because me and BJ got some old retired benefits out of that. With some,
we got a few.
We can actually go to the doctor and they'll actually pay for it this time. So I want to thank betting and wherever we're going for that. But where I am a little curious and is you talked about the infrastructure and 5G coming. Where is the infrastructure from a stadium and venue perspective here in the US of rolling out 5G? Because we know a lot of these stadiums are outdated. They're networking. I know Cisco is really worked hard to try to upgrade some of these older stadiums. How much and what is the timetable do you foresee in a full rollout around 5G?
Great question, and congrats on your CBA. So I'm glad you boys are getting something.
Trust me, we were what we was hoping for. We need it.
We find a new ache and pain every morning.
Day.
So yeah, it's much needed.
I don't doubt that for a second. So it's like the NFL definitely led out of the sports leagues in terms of infrastructure, and every one of even the antiquated stadiums have like 3 10 gigabit pipes. I mean, they have telco carrier class infrastructure, and everyone competes to get the badge and the logo. So we understand that. 5G is interesting, and especially on the wideband. I mean, it comes in different flavors. The United States decided to declare anything that's not 4G 5G, which is a little misleading because when you get into Europe and Asia, they have a little stricter in that definition, but hence 4G LTE in one carrier may be considered 5G. But the true wideband, I'm getting my 2 gigs and everything, has a radius of a couple thousand feet. Now, the interesting part here is this is radio. So it's not like I have to drag and put my cable and backhoe this thing in there. I just need to get a radio receiver into that area, and I suddenly lit up 20, 30 gigabits a second. And now what you're really working on are the devices, the content, and the interaction. I mean, that's why 5G is going to be this disruptive as it rolls out, because it's a new network that just has this much, much higher capacity and latency. So a cell phone, and even like when you're watching a typical television broadcast on your cable, you're 8 to 12 to maybe 15 seconds behind.
Wow.
I'm sure you guys have seen this in a million sports bars where you'd walk in and the plays are going down the line and they're not aligned and they're moving on that. You get into OTT stuff where you're converting it for a CDN and using fancy acronyms like HLS, which, boring, but they're going to delay everything by like 45 seconds to a minute. So that puts you a mobile device a little further out. 5G as a core network can run at 10 milliseconds of delay. So that our brains right now are running at 30 milliseconds, and this network will run it below that. So you're going to be able to have as close to real time, and then the ability to synchronize those signals, those pieces, that consumption, so that in the stadium, that's actually the easiest problem to solve. Between stadiums will be very interesting because you're going to have a common infrastructure and you have those backbones that connect them. And then ultimately connecting to places, like I said, I think you'll see sports books and people like, you'll be out at Caesars and the Wynn and doing that to start. But ultimately that will proliferate as the thing rolls out. Now, everybody keeps it a little bit secret sauce, but you had, I think, 12 major cities and markets were rolled out, at least in Verizon's 5G last year.
Okay.
There's grades of it. So there's lower, middle, and the high, but the big ultra wideband where it's 2 gigs to your phone and you're going to be able to look at AR, VR fantasy play. And like you point out, I mean, that's the future is keep the fans in the stadium. But you ask any 12 to 15-year-old kid, they're not like we were. I would be glued to a television set to watch you guys at 1:00 on a Sunday. Yep. There I am. I'm not moving. My whole day is revolving around you. And now the kids are like, they're going to watch it when they watch it, how they watched it, and they really only care about their fantasy player. I don't even know how they keep on the team. And of course, you look at the bets and the pools and people running that, and this is now going to migrate from informal betting to very large scale money. And then not only would we be making bets, but you can see the ad dollars tying to that, and then the e-commerce tying to that. And so I foresee very large scale monetization across that whole spectrum of consumption. And because it's radio, it's going to happen a lot faster. I mean, this is going to be a 3-year adoption from today. We're talking about it to now, and you're like, wow, that really created $5 billion in annual revenue.
So Eric, am I hearing you correctly? We can put to bed all the concerns with latency as we continue to roll out 5G? And it's not going to be a disparity among platforms, whether it's a mobile device, whether it's OTT, what have you?
Well, put to bed is a strong word. That's kind of like, have we put to bed the disparity between the audio level of the programming and the audio level of the ad? We have not. And will we put?
I move fast, Eric. Okay, I'm trying to get there, buddy.
I don't have your 40 speed. I'm sorry.
It is awful slow. Trust me. I can tell you that one.
I don't have that 40 speed, but what I would say is what you will have is different tools. So in different areas of consumption, you will be able to control that. Like in the venue where you own the network, you're going to be able to make sure for the first time everybody's getting things at the same time and be between places. You're not going to be able to fix how cable and satellite work, and they're part of the distribution chain. And you're not going to fix how the internet delivers out on an app on a CDN, but you will have areas where latency is critical to that part. I mean, the holy grail for the big media companies, and they've approached this for years, and it's just a very large problem, is how are you sitting in, unit A on the third floor is got this signal, and unit B on the third floor is yelling hooray for the touchdown, and right. Everyone's trying to lock that in. Somewhere down the line, yes. But in the next several years, what you'll see is areas of viewership that are controlled. And that's why I think those in-stadium experiences will really drive what flows out of that, because they're the most, one, technically addressable, gotcha. And two, instantly monetizable, right? Because who's going to want to not go to the stadium and be able to go, wow, I can look on my phone, or they'll be doing the Oculus Rift, they'll be doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And I know you guys work with individual teams and parts. It'll be interesting to see how those teams compete for or reward, depending on what we're going to say, their fan base to gain that edge, and knowing how important that whole model runs to the cash flow to the owners.
I got go ahead, Christy.
There was something you asked right at the beginning. I want to make sure we talk about it. One of the things that all of this mass amount of increased bandwidth will bring, I think, is the ability to also provide multiple different ways to participate or not participate, right, Eric? So like if you can put out just a broadcast, and you can also have enough bandwidth left to offer in a mobile app, here's the full betting experience, or here's the fantasy only gaming, or here's the under 21 game versus the over 21 experience. Yep. Like, is there really going to be, it sounds like there's going to be plenty of bandwidth to do all of that kind of those experiences all within a phone, right? In venue.
I think it is, but I always say it's a double-edged sword, guys, in terms of how teams and leagues should be looking at gaming. What we've seen with fantasy, and I think Eric said this, is 15 to 17-year-olds no longer track teams. They track players because of fantasy. So the days of you growing up and watching a team with your dad and being addicted to that team, and that's your team for life, has kind of changed a little bit. And you're going to see it across even more disparity when you start the betting aspect, because one thing that we know, I have a 23-year-old and a 22-year-old and a 19-year-old. They love to bet. They're gamers. And so what I can tell you is that they don't want to watch a game. They don't want to watch 3 hours of somebody doing something that they're not involved in or have a hand in winning. That's what video games, and that's why 2K and Madden and those games are so effective, is it gives them a chance to play. And so when you look at the habits of what sports betting is and kind of what it brings you into a game. It gives you an opportunity to play, but there's also a community aspect to it. And what better community than fan bases? They are all mapped around something that is a liked type of team, player, something. So one of the aspects that you get with sports betting out of that data is the cohorts, which is where FanReach is kind of a specialty in, is how do we connect you together to start offering these personalized experiences and linking you in groups and communities that are like-minded. An under 21 game, for instance, over 21 game, or if you're like me and BJ, accessible games for the 50 and over crowd that are very simple to use, because we can be technically challenged at times, right? But the key of how this is going to play out is, even though you're increasing your revenues, are you decreasing your avid fan base? The guys that are going to follow you, whether the team is winning, losing, it's raining, it's snowing, are you still coming out? I think over the next 5 to 10 years, as these technologies become more prevalent, we're going to really see how this is affecting kind of what I consider the fan psyche. So I want to see if you guys have any feedback on that, because I just know it's changed my consumption habits. So I don't know about you guys. Have you guys thought about that much?
I'll riff off that, and then I think you hit the whole point. It's hard to say which came first, the consumption behavior or the technology, or a bit of both, right? Yeah. And as kids grew up, as you know, I will plead the fifth on my technology ignorance, but as a 50-something, I need simple, but I need a go button. Okay,
go button.
So
easy button.
Go button, and maybe swipe left and right, and that's what we're happy. But the way kids are there, and I think that what you're talking about is the same problem that all of television faces, where exactly. You get a broadcast model, you're going to send out, I'm going to do my upfronts and my CPM, and that's your fan model. Yep. And the thing that's going to migrate is to where the customized programming comes in. Like you say, the ability, what you have now that you couldn't do is you can now make really individual connections. And what you're going to watch is the same way a CPM and a rate and a spot rate on an ad goes from 1x to 5x to 20x, because I went with the right ad to the exact right person. Yep. You're going to take now a family of 4 going to an NFL game and be able to hit mom, dad, and the 2 kids in exactly the way that the sponsor would have liked, rather than the singular large-scale brand. And that is going to mean that the ad rates are going to have to go up per spot, the tech, Yep. But I mean, you take, again, consumer behavior with our mythical 15-year-old kids. They expect to be curated. Yes, they're actually, where we wouldn't opt in and we don't like, if you give me the wrong ad, they're irritated. And why aren't you showing me what I want to see? And that is, a marketer's dream and a brand's dream. But I think that's what's going to go on. And look, the good news is with the fantasy, they've got now where we grew up, and I appreciate the loyalty and I appreciate the fierceness, and we get that. Generations evolve. The fact now, though, is that you can, with the cap space, like watching this off season is crazy right now, right? Watching things move in the contracts and the things signed. But what you're allowing is, as players move, loyalties don't. And so I think you're actually, if anything, creating deeper fan. Like the kids that I talk to today school me on football in a way that I couldn't even have imagined when I was their age.
Yep.
And so I would say they're more engaged than when we would sit and watch a given team, because they now know the entire league.
Well, you can learn it through Madden now. True. All you got to do is play Madden.
Yeah.
You learn every player names and everything, because I know my kids didn't watch football for a long time, but they knew all the players in Madden, and they knew me and BJ were awful slow in the throwbacks.
You keep lumping me
got rid of me.
You.
They got rid of me quick.
Don't curate your comments.
BJ, I got to put you in there, because I saw myself was like, wow, who gave me a rating?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I watched me and I was like, okay, I may need to temper some of my memories of my playing ability, not as much of a high point as I once thought. E, what else is moving the needle in your space as far as what you guys are doing? We know the gaming and betting, coming online. What else do you foresee coming down the road that's going to help push, technology forward and to new heights?
Well, I mean, we're talking about ways that you actually interact. And what I think what is sort of unspoken in this, and Kenyon kind of mentioned it a little bit with, individual feeds, but before you were really held hostage to a production truck and what did they bring in? And here's my main feed. And even look at a football field in HD, you always have to go from 50 to the goalpost or the other way. Whereas 4K, you can goalpost to goalpost.
Right.
And actually, you'll be able to zoom in and watch players. So I think that the idea that we're going to get bigger networks, we're going to be able to get much unbounded levels of feed, it's going to allow the actual consumer to curate and pick in. So while they have these affinities and like different players and all sorts of stuff, they're going to be able to have available to them a programming bouquet that was technically and monetarily impossible. You fast forward 5 years and you're going to have like the ultimate bespoke playlist of how you want to consume sports in that way. And
an Amazon experience is what you're saying. You're going to have an Amazon experience. I'm just curious, where does the new broadcast dollars come from the NFL? Where's that increase going to come from? It's going to come from streaming platforms. It's going to come from your Amazons, your Apples, your Googles, which is what the NFL is planning for. When you talk about overlays and 5G capability now embedded into OTT platforms, that now you can segment gamers and under 21 audiences, you kind of see where the NFL sees the growth and where the NBA sees the growth. It is a clear picture for me, because it creates value on multiple sides. The question I got that I think we are trying to figure out is, where do teams play, and how are they? Right now, it's a sponsorship with gaming companies, right? They're really kind of licensing the real-time data or the data portion of it. How do teams get a piece of the betting, the betting quan, besides just the sponsorship and the engagement? But do you think eventually that teams will partner with a Bet365 or a BetMGM and really start honing in to taking little pieces and maybe rev shares of each bet? Do you? And I'm gonna challenge both of you guys on that, because I know that's a sticky subject these days.
I think they should. And while right now they have hitched their wagon, a lot of the broadcast entities have hitched their wagon to some betting entities. They've done it at arm's length. And I think eventually, if they want to own that audience, they're going to ask for a piece, or a bigger piece of that pie, because it's their audience, in which we talk about all the time when we're discussing data. Why not control your audience? It's the same for a team. It's the same for a broadcaster. You're bringing something of value to your partner who is on the gaming side. Why not say, hey, we need to go back to the negotiation table? And to your earlier point about, the Amazon model and all that, you're already seeing those relationships. NFL games are being streamed on Facebook, on Amazon. College games are being streamed on Facebook. They're providing content to the Facebooks of the world. So we're there, and they know where we're headed, and they're trying to recruit a whole new generation of fans where those fans live.
Mm-hmm. But also the venue can provide a really, really different experience, right? Like, I'm going to throw myself into the 50-year-old category here too, but I remember when I was a kid, adults would go to the dog track to bet on dogs, right? And you could just bet through the newspaper or call your bookie or whatever, but that was a really different experience than going to the dog track. And as television came out, that was, watching the Kentucky Derby is a very different thing than actually going to the Kentucky Derby. So I think it's probably the teams have it sounds funny to say it this way, but teams probably have the same ability to be creative and use that collective audience, that big arena space. And as Eric was talking about, the technology in those big spaces to do things that, just aren't that interesting. Like, it's a really different experience to watch a movie at home than it is to watch it in a theater. And they're basically the exact same thing, but one of them was with a group of people. And even if it's only that basic difference, I think teams can jump off of that and make something really different. And then Kenyon, we were talking earlier about how, these arenas are building whole
Districts.
activities and all the stuff around the arena. So it becomes like a full day, experience. So
well, University of Texas has done a great job of that. When Chris Del Conte came on as the new athletic director, he wanted to make it an event, not just a football game, but a whole event around it, from the pregame to the game itself and to the postgame. So they incorporated, a fair like atmosphere there, and you've got concerts after the game, you got it prior to the game. Of course, you have your traditional tailgating, but it's an experience. And so once that game's over, hopefully the Longhorns have won, and everyone's morale is still up.
You love to bring in your little Longhorns winning. I'll take it. I'm sorry, I got to stop him there, guys.
They will continue to partake of the festivities is the only point I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to throw that in your face. My daddy, Oklahoma Sooner.
Thank you very much. As long as you pay homage to the real team, that's all I'm asking.
All right, I acknowledge that for now.
We see your helmet in the background. We can see it, BJ.
We're going to do this every single show.
Yeah, but we can't help it. This is
just an example. That's all I'm saying.
And a very good one. And I think like you guys are hitting on it, and Kenyon started with the question about what do the teams do, but and you guys hit on all the parts there is like, and look at the passion, right? You already got Oklahoma at UT. Boom.
Yes.
That escalated quickly.
And we'll go to the game just to yell at each other and make it be known. But that is a big question that no one's really asking too, is we're all fighting the HD experience at home. It's a very good experience. This is what teams and venues are really trying to fight against is if I'm going to charge you $200 for a ticket, it's going to be $100 to park, beers, $15. I mean, you're dropping,
a family of four is going to drop $400, right?
$400. Yeah. So
somebody better win at least a couple $100 when they're betting.
Well, I better be entertained.
Or they could be down $1,000, but that's
exactly. So you got to have a reason to attract them from that viewing experience. You talked about Oculus.
But if you guys talk about. But sorry, Kenyon, if you talk about exactly what you just said and what BJ was talking about, this digital infrastructure means you can definitely, we think why you get there, right? Tailgating, the experience of doing it. You're going to have digital options to create that make you go there because they won't be available to you at home. So while that HD experience is cool, if you bring in your Oculus and you're running and you've got you can see inside the locker room. You can maybe even get text and talk to a player before the game.
Yeah, there you go.
You'll be able to get, you'll have super high touch fan relationship that will actually push them to literal fanaticism. True Comic-Con fanboy stuff where they're into it. And that's what you want. And they'll come in and they'll drop that dollar because the NFL and the different teams will put in hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure to give you an experience that you're not going to get at home. Yeah, it's why Christy points out, why do you go to a theater? Because someone made a giant screen of the piece and you have a collective event. But when you can all share a beer and the barbecue and the whatever and this crazy digital experience, that becomes the whole reason. And to me, the technology is going to hold the fans, not drive them home.
Right.
Like that. I think that is a very powerful statement because I know that's one of the key aspects of what we've seen in the growth around experiences around the stadium is they realize we have to create more than just you watching the game, right? We want to entertain you before and after, and it's all about cash conversions too. So it's a big question that we ask to a lot of teams is who owns your fan? Mm-hmm. Like who owns your fan? Like Amazon is not letting buyers and sellers run transactions and control their own platforms. Because it's Amazon. They're going to run it on theirs because the AI and the intelligence can start to understand you better as a consumer. What we hope to get to with teams is that mobile platform of what FanReach builds within their context of the gaming aspect and the marketing cards and the content, the digital management and the cohorts and how they're all put together from an architecture's perspective is driving one thing, and that's a conversion. But we have to learn what those habits are, and we have to be able to track those in order to provide those experiences to you. that's what I believe the cell phone and the mobile platforms operate right now will provide. And because we've kind of accelerated the cashless movement with COVID, I think we are really going to see an acceleration in the next 2 years around the data and the experience. We become smarter. We're able to segment the data and put them into groups and start to market individually to those groups that have experiences that are catered toward them. So I think we're moving in the right direction. My only concern around all of this technology is on the other side of this, how do they implement it and how do they phase these approaches in? You mentioned, well, 5G's got to come to the stadium, right? But they're having talks about being able to do this right now, right? So how do we, I guess, make it an easy button for these teams and these leagues to start adapting these technologies, giving their legacy, legacy models, their sponsorship relationships. I mean, I could go on and on. The most difficult part is, hey, we like it. We want to do this. How do we proceed with you guys on the outside? So I'll throw that at both of you guys as well.
I don't know, BJ, you want to step into that?
Well, no, that's a question we get all the time, and everyone perceives this as a lot of heavy lifting from a technology standpoint. And now with the onboarding of 5G, those integrations is that I would think that would make it a lot easier for these models, where they don't have to go through a wholesale transition from an infrastructure standpoint, and integrate, more seamlessly with these new platforms.
But a lot of it is all comes back to the analysis of data, which is another huge aspect of what Zixi does, and of course what FanReach does is how some of the most important business decisions you can make is what to stop doing. Right? If you're going to bring on 5 new things, well, are you literally adding 5 new things to the 27 you're already doing? Or can you get rid of 5 things?
Thank you.
That's a great point, because a lot of things they have currently, they don't talk to each other. They don't jive. So that's a big sticking
or you don't know if they work or not, right?
Right.
You know what people are using or not using. And so that's a lot of what Eric's company has brought along with these super new, awesome, low latency streams is the ability to measure things, and I'll let him talk about that, in order to make better decisions, which is what everybody's going to have to figure out to do.
Yeah.
No, and that's when I wanted to let the table run, and thank you, Christy, for the part. But, it kind of started with what does it mean to a team? And then as BJ talks about the infrastructure of the part, and Christy laid the data. But look, the NFL, pick on that because it's the subject of the day. I mean, they know they share revenue. They have a very understood model about the assets and how the teams participate, merchandising and all that stuff. But the teams themselves have their own lines of revenue. And the key part here is that where before you would know who your season ticket holders are, and you kind of knew that, and maybe you reached out to them in a mailing campaign, you're going to have data on your actual fan base at an unprecedented level. And that's going to become your most valuable asset. And then to Christy, but what you do with that, and the teams own that data. You know what I mean? That's an actual, if you're Pittsburgh, you're New England, pick a team, doesn't matter. You know who they are, and you're going to know the grandfather, the father, the mother, the kids, all the way down, and be tracking who's coming to the stadium. You'll be able to figure out who's going on Sports Fantasy. There'll be data shared between the Madden games, and that's going to become, how do you provide fan bliss and fantopia, whatever that's going to become. And then to Christy's other point, how do you measure success? So we're able to take and run the idea that, we could provide an infrastructure, we give you the business to business controls on it. There will be a myriad of consumer edge points. There'll be people that are doing all kinds of things with these teams to figure out, because the other challenge is it's not entirely clear on how the next generation of fans will consume sports, media, entertainment, whatever. And anyone who thinks they understand doesn't, because, and here's a bunch of us at, in our 50s trying to understand what someone did at 15. And so you need to be able to iterate. You got the whole Silicon Valley idea of fail faster and barely viable minimum product. But at the same point, you got standards, you got NFL, you got team. But what you'll be able to do just in a simple tailgating aspect, it's going to be crazy. I mean, you're going to be able to have holographic things. You're going to be able to have direct player and coach contact. You'll be able to sit outside in a screen and watch the actual press conference. I mean, where instead of sitting for 3 hours as you exit a parking lot going nowhere, you'll be waiting for your Uber. You won't even have to worry about the driving part. And even those are going to be tricked out with all kinds of internal screens and immersive experiences. So I think, if anything, sports are going to be able to connect to their fans in a way that was just literally impossible. And what they'll be able to provide as experiences is up to their imagination to be creative with a crazy palette of technologies available.
Well, you made a salient point, Eric, and it was about the data and having a holistic picture of who your fans are. And actually, that's where the sticking point is, the challenge, because the ecosystem is so disjointed, fragmented currently. And that's what when we speak to our clients and NFL teams and others at FanReach, we're talking about aggregating all those touch points so you have a better idea of who's coming through your turnstile and who that fan is, and therefore driving them to conversions, as Kenyon loves to say. So that's the goal right now, is how do we build a unified commerce platform where I have a better idea of who that fan is, and now once I have that in place, we can offer them all those bells and whistles you just outlined, which are going to be outstanding. I may go back to the stadium. I may not have to just sit here on the couch now. We older guys, we rather have bathrooms readily available.
Bathroom readily available. Nobody's in the bathroom.
Kitchen readily available.
The concession stand is always open.
Right. And
you first in line.
Don't worry. Wait till that drone comes right down to your car in the parking lot and delivers. And you'll know, and it'll have the beers. Bathroom thing's still a separate issue. But
yeah, I tell you.
Well, thanks for joining us for this episode of the FanReach podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It's always a pleasure for me to hear the unique perspective on sports entertainment from Kenyon and BJ. Not many of us had the talent to play professional sports, so I feel like it's a pretty instructive experience to hear how they see the industry, having participated in sports as players, commentators, business owners, consultants, fans, and parents of fans, and now as experts helping us more clearly see the intersection of technology and entertainment. Be sure to follow FanReach on your podcasting platform of choice or YouTube and LinkedIn. That way you can keep up with the latest in sports mobile app technology from FanReach.